The stars had always been silent. For thousands of years, humans looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They launched probes with golden records. They built telescopes and searched for any sign of life beyond their small blue world. They never found anything, but something found them. In the cold space beyond Neptune, where sunlight was just another distant star, reality itself seemed to tear open. A hole appeared in the fabric of space, glowing with strange purple light. Then another hole opened, and another. Soon, thousands of these tears filled the darkness like wounds in the universe. Ships began to pour through, massive vessels of black metal, each one stretching more than a kilometer in length. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls covered in weapons that glowed with deadly energy. These were not explorers or scientists. These were conquerors. The Varath Dominion had arrived. High Commander Vorath Kul stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He was tall, even for his species, with gray skin that looked like stone and 4 eyes that glowed a soft orange. His body was covered in ceremonial armor, made from the bones of species his people had defeated. Each bone was a trophy. Each trophy was a world that had fallen. He watched the blue planet grow larger on his viewing screen. Earth, the natives called it. Such a small world. Such a weak species. His scouts had studied these humans for half a year. They had learned their languages, mapped their cities, counted their weapons. The humans had nuclear bombs. They had jets and tanks and aircraft carriers. They had satellites and space stations. Vorath Kul had laughed when he read the reports. Nuclear weapons? His ships could survive the heat of a star. Jets and tanks. His soldiers wore armor that could stop any projectile. The humans were still crawling in the mud while his people ruled 1,000 galaxies. How many worlds have we conquered now? Vorath Kul asked his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Torinth. 2,047, High Commander, Torinth replied. Earth will be 2,048. A minor addition, Vorath Kul said. But their planet has good metals, good water. We will strip it bare and use their people as laborers in our mines. The fleet continued to advance. 9,900 ships. The largest invasion force the Dominion had ever assembled for such a small target. Usually they sent 100 ships to conquer a primitive world. But Vorath Kul was cautious. He had not survived 300 years of warfare by taking chances. Besides, his soldiers needed practice. Many of them were young, untested in real combat. Earth would be good training for them. Let them learn to kill on this world, so they would be ready for the real battles ahead. Begin broadcasting the surrender demand, Vorath Kul ordered. All frequencies, all languages. The communication officer pressed a button, and the message went out. It flew toward Earth at the speed of light, carrying words that had been spoken to 2,000 worlds before. People of Earth, this is High Commander Vorath Kul of the Varath Dominion. Your planet now belongs to us. You will surrender all weapons. You will surrender all leaders. You will accept our rule without resistance. Those who obey will be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. Those who resist will be destroyed. You have one rotation of your planet to respond. This is your only warning. The message reached Earth 7 hours later. It was picked up by radio telescopes, military bases, and civilian receivers. Within minutes, every government on the planet knew what was coming. At the United Nations building in New York, world leaders gathered in emergency session. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, all of them staring at screens showing the massive alien fleet approaching their world. We should surrender, the representative from France said. His voice was shaking. Look at those ships. We cannot fight that. We cannot even touch that. Surrender means slavery, the American president replied. She was a woman named Sarah Chen, a former Marine who had lost her husband in a war 20 years ago. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with cold fire. I did not become president to hand my people over to aliens. Then what do you suggest? The Russian president asked. Our nuclear weapons are worthless against ships that can travel between stars. Our armies might as well be throwing rocks. President Chen smiled. It was not a nice smile. Let me tell you a story, she said. 70 years ago, something crashed in the desert of New Mexico. Something that was not from this earth. Our government found it. Our scientists studied it, and our engineers have been working on it ever since. She pressed a button on her tablet, and the main screen changed. It showed blueprints, weapons, ships, technologies that should not exist. Project Lazarus, Chen said. Every major nation has one. We have been preparing for this day since before most of us were born. We never knew when the visitors would come. We never knew if they would be friends or enemies. But we prepared for enemies. The room went silent. Leaders who had been ready to surrender suddenly sat up straighter. Hope, fragile and desperate, began to spread. "Show me," the Chinese president said. "Show me what we have." Chen nodded to a general standing by the door. He was old, his hair white, his body covered in scars. But his eyes were sharp, and he moved like a predator. "I am General Marcus Stone," he said. "I have commanded Project Lazarus for 30 years. Everything you thought you knew about our capabilities was a lie. Let me show you the truth." For the next 2 hours, he explained, the railguns hidden on the moon, powered by fusion reactors that humanity officially did not possess. The fleet of 62 warships built in underground caves and underwater bases, using technology that mixed human engineering with alien secrets. The Shiva missiles, weapons that did not explode but instead created tiny black holes that ate anything they touched. "We have 12,000 of them," Stone said, "enough to kill worlds." "Why did you never tell us?" the British Prime Minister demanded. "All these years you kept the secret while we argued about borders and trade deals?" "Because secrets only stay secret when no one knows them," Chen replied. "Every government in this room has their own version of Lazarus. We have shared information in private, we have coordinated in private, but we never spoke of it openly because we knew that someday someone would be listening." She looked up at the ceiling as if she could see through it to the stars beyond. "And we were right. They have been watching us for 6 months. They think they know everything about us. They think we are primitive, weak, easy prey." Her smile returned, sharper than before. "They are wrong." Far away in the cold reaches of space, Vorathkul was growing impatient. 20 hours had passed since his surrender demand. The humans had not replied. "Perhaps they are too primitive to understand our message," Torrance suggested. "Perhaps they do not have the technology to respond." "They have radio," Vorathkul said. "They have been broadcasting into space for over a century. They can respond. They are choosing not to." He found this strange. Every other species had responded immediately, either with surrender or with panicked attempts at negotiation. The humans were doing neither. They were just silent. "What are they doing down there?" he muttered. He ordered his scouts to observe the planet more closely. Their reports came back within hours, and they made no sense. "They are turning off their machines," a scout reported. "Their satellites are going dark. Their communications are shutting down. It is like they are hiding." "Hiding?" Vorathkul laughed. "Hiding from us? We can see their entire planet. There is nowhere to hide." But even as he laughed, something cold touched his spine. In 300 years of war, he had seen many things. He had seen species fight. He had seen species flee. He had seen species beg and bargain and betray each other. He had never seen a species go silent. On Earth, the preparations were complete. Every government had activated their Lazarus protocols. Soldiers who had trained in secret for decades were moving into position. Weapons that officially did not exist were being loaded and armed. In Montana, a farmer named Jack Wilson watched the news on his old television. He was 60 years old with rough hands and a weathered face. He had fought in 2 wars for his country. He had thought his fighting days were over. Then his phone rang. The voice on the other end spoke a code phrase that he had memorized 40 years ago and never expected to hear. "Lazarus is rising," the voice said. "Report to Station 7. Jack turned off his television. He walked to his barn, where his old tractor sat rusting in the corner. He reached under the seat and pulled out a key he had carried for 4 decades. Behind the barn, hidden under a concrete slab covered with dirt and grass, was a door. Jack used his key to open it. Inside was an elevator that took him down into the earth. 15 minutes later, he stepped out into a massive underground complex. Hundreds of soldiers were already there, checking weapons and loading equipment. The weapons were not guns or rifles. They were things Jack did not have names for. things that glowed and hummed and seemed almost alive. A young officer approached him. "Sergeant Wilson, I thought you retired." "I did," Jack said, "but I made a promise." "We all did." He looked around at the other soldiers. Some were young, barely old enough to vote. Others were old like him, gray-haired and wrinkled but still strong. All of them wore the same expression. Not fear, not excitement, determination. "What is the plan?" Jack asked. "We wait," the officer said. "When they come close enough, we hit them with everything we have, and we do not stop hitting them until they are dead or we are." Jack nodded. It was a simple plan. He liked simple plans. "Good, error," he said. "Give me a gun." Above them, the stars continued to turn. The Varath fleet grew closer, and Earth waited in silence, like a trap ready to spring. Varath Kul made his decision as his fleet crossed the orbit of Mars. "Enough waiting," he said. "Send the vanguard. 400 ships. Destroy their military bases and their major cities. Show them the cost of defiance." Torrance hesitated. "High Commander, we still do not understand their silence. Perhaps we should send scouts first, learn more about—" "I have conquered 2,000 worlds," Varath Kul interrupted. "I do not need to understand primitives. I need to crush them. Send the vanguard." 400 ships broke formation and accelerated toward Earth. They were the fastest ships in the fleet, armed with plasma cannons that could melt mountains. Each one carried 1,000 soldiers eager for combat. They passed the moon at exactly 3:47 Greenwich Mean Time. At 03:48, the moon opened fire. The first railgun slug was a bar of tungsten, 50 meters long. It left the hidden launcher at 8% of the speed of light. At that velocity, it carried more energy than any nuclear bomb humans had ever built. It hit the lead ship before the crew even knew they were under attack. The ship did not explode. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there. The next moment there was nothing but a cloud of atoms spreading into space. More slugs followed. 10, 20, 50, 100. They came from craters that had looked empty, from mountains that had seemed dead, from bases that human governments had sworn did not exist. 12 Varath ships died in the first 3 seconds. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, alarms began to scream. "What is happening?" Varath Kul demanded. "Report!" "The moon!" Torrance shouted. "They have weapons on the moon!" "Railguns, High Commander. Moving at .08 light speed. Our shields cannot—" Another alert cut him off. Missiles were rising from Earth's surface. Thousands of them. But these were not the primitive nuclear weapons the Varath had expected. These missiles moved wrong. They flickered and twisted in ways that made the targeting computers go insane. "I cannot get a lock," a weapons officer reported. "They are bending light around themselves. Our sensors cannot see them clearly." The missiles reached the vanguard and began to explode. But they did not explode with fire or radiation. They exploded with darkness. Tiny spheres of absolute black appeared where each warhead detonated. The spheres lasted only a fraction of a second. But in that fraction of a second, they swallowed everything they touched. Ships, shields, armor, crew. Nothing survived. Varath Kul watched in horror as his vanguard was torn apart. Ships that had survived battles against empires were being shredded like paper. Crews that had conquered worlds were dying without even understanding what was killing them. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Those weapons, those are singularities, artificial black holes. That technology does not exist. We do not even have that technology. But the humans did. They had been working on it for 70 years, in secret laboratories buried under mountains and oceans. They had failed 1,000 times. They had killed themselves a dozen times with accidents and mistakes. But they had kept trying, kept learning, kept building. And now they were unleashing their creations on the enemy that had come to enslave them. 90 minutes after the first shot was fired, the vanguard was finished. Of 400 ships, less than 200 remained, and those survivors were fleeing back toward the main fleet, their crews screaming warnings that no one wanted to believe. Varath Kul sat in his command chair, his 4 eyes wide with shock. In 300 years, he had never lost a battle. In 300 years, he had never been surprised. Tonight, he had experienced both. Torrance approached him carefully. "High Commander, What are your orders? Vorthkul was silent for a long moment. He thought about retreat. He thought about caution. He thought about all the lessons he had learned in the centuries of war. Then he thought about what the Dominion Council would do to him if he returned home defeated by primitives. All ships, he said. His voice was cold now. All emotion burned away. Full assault, every weapon, every soldier, overwhelm them with numbers, drown them in fire. He stood up, his hands curled into fists. I do not care how many ships we lose. I do not care how many soldiers die. We will crush this world and everything on it. We will leave nothing but ash and silence. His orders went out across the fleet. 9,000 ships began to move toward Earth, their weapons charging, their crews preparing for war. They did not know that they were sailing into a storm of fire and blood. They did not know that most of them would never sail again. They did not know that they had finally found a species that would rather die than kneel. And somewhere on the surface of the moon, an old soldier named Captain James Morrison watched his screens and allowed himself a small smile. His railguns were hot, his crews were ready, and the enemy was coming straight toward them. You wanted a fight, he murmured. You found one. Now let us see who bleeds more. He pressed a button, and the guns began to fire again. The war for Earth had begun. The space around Earth had become a graveyard. Pieces of destroyed ships floated in the darkness. Bodies drifted among the wreckage, frozen solid in the cold vacuum. Fires still burned inside broken hulls where oxygen had not yet escaped. It was a scene from a nightmare, and it was only the beginning. High Commander Vorthkul stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest and watched his fleet descend toward Earth. 9,000 warships moved in perfect formation, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Behind them, the wreckage of the Vanguard served as a reminder of what waited below. Status report, Vorthkul demanded. The moon batteries are still active, Torrent replied. They have destroyed another 60 ships during our approach. Our shields are holding against the railgun slugs, but only at full power. We cannot maintain this for long. Then we will not need to maintain it for long, Vorthkul said. Order the assault carriers to begin landing operations. Put our soldiers on the ground. Let the humans fight us face to face. He smiled, showing teeth that were sharp like knives. On the ground, his warriors would crush these humans like insects. No amount of secret technology could save them from millions of Virus soldiers in powered armor. The assault carriers broke formation and began their descent. They were massive ships, each one carrying 10,000 soldiers and hundreds of ground vehicles. Their armor was thick enough to survive orbital bombardment. Their shields could stop anything the humans had shown so far, or so the Verith believed. In Washington, D.C., President Sarah Chen watched the enemy ships enter the atmosphere. She was in the deepest bunker under the White House, surrounded by generals and advisors. Screens covered every wall, showing feeds from satellites, drones, and ground stations. They are landing, General Stone said. 12 carriers coming down over North America, more over Europe, Asia, and Africa. They are spreading out, trying to establish multiple beachheads. Then we meet them at every beachhead, Chen replied. Activate all Lazarus ground forces. And General? Yes, Madam President. Tell our people they have permission to use everything. No restrictions, no limitations, whatever it takes. Stone nodded. He understood what she was saying. The weapons they had built in secret were terrible things. Some of them had been designed to fight aliens. Others had been designed for wars between humans, wars so awful that no one had ever dared to start them. Now they would use all of it. God help us, Stone whispered. God helps those who help themselves, Chen replied. Let us help ourselves. The first assault carriers landed in the Nevada desert, near the ruins of Las Vegas. The city had already been destroyed by orbital bombardment. Its famous lights turned to ash and rubble. The Varath considered it a good landing zone, flat and empty, with plenty of room to deploy their forces. They did not know that the desert was waiting for them. Commander Raxith was the first to step off his carrier. He was young for a Varath officer, only 80 years old, with dark gray skin and bright orange eyes. His armor was polished and clean, never tested in real combat. This would be his first battle, and he was eager to prove himself. Spread out, he ordered his soldiers. Establish a perimeter. We will advance on the nearest human city at dawn. His soldiers obeyed instantly. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons ready, their sensors scanning for any sign of the enemy. They found nothing. The desert was empty and silent, just sand and rocks and broken buildings. Raxith frowned. Where were the humans? Had they all fled? Were they too frightened to fight? Then the ground exploded. Mines. Thousands of them, buried under the sand. But these were not ordinary mines. They did not explode with fire or metal fragments. They exploded with plasma, with magnetic pulses, with concentrated beams of light that cut through Vareth armor like water through paper. Soldiers died by the hundreds in the first few seconds. Their screams filled the radio channels. Their bodies fell and did not move again. "Ambush!" Raxith screamed. "Take cover! Return fire!" But there was nothing to fire at. The mines were automatic, triggered by motion and heat. The humans who had planted them were long gone, hiding in bunkers miles away, watching through cameras as the Varath died. Then the drones came. They were small, no bigger than birds. They flew in swarms of thousands, moving so fast that Varath sensors could barely track them. Each drone carried a tiny payload, a few grams of explosive material wrapped around a core of shaped metal. Alone, they were nothing. Together, they were death. The drones hit the Vareth soldiers like a wave. They flew into gaps in armor, into air vents, into the soft spaces between helmet and neck seal. They exploded in bursts of fire and metal, killing not through power but through precision. Raxith watched his army die around him. 2,000 soldiers had landed with him. Within 10 minutes, half of them were dead or dying. The survivors were scattered, hiding behind rocks and vehicles, firing at enemies they could not see. "Request orbital support," Raxith screamed into his communicator. "We need bombardment. We need—" A drone flew into his open mouth. He never finished the sentence. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. The Varath landed expecting easy victories. They found hell instead. In Germany, human soldiers in powered exoskeletons ambushed a landing force in the Black Forest. They moved through the trees like ghosts, appearing from nowhere, to fire single devastating shots before vanishing again. The Varath could not catch them, could not pin them down. Every time they thought they had found the enemy was already somewhere else. In China, the landing force came down in the Gobi Desert. They found an army waiting for them, 1 million human soldiers in fortified positions. But these were not ordinary fortifications. They were made of smart materials that could repair themselves, that could shift and change to block incoming fire. The Varath threw everything they had at those walls. The walls held. In Brazil, the Amazon rainforest came alive with traps and ambushes, trees that exploded when touched, rivers that had been poisoned with chemicals that ate through Vareth armor, animals that had been fitted with cameras and bombs, turning the entire jungle into a weapon. And everywhere the human soldiers fought with a fury that the Varath could not understand. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Vorathkul watched the casualty reports flood in. His face was stone, showing nothing, but inside he was screaming. "Impossible," he muttered. "This is impossible." "We have lost 200,000 soldiers in the first day," Torrent reported. His voice was shaking. "Ground Commander Yexith is dead. So is Commander Raxith, Commander Belthor, Commander Seneth, and 47 other senior officers. Our landing forces are requesting immediate evacuation." "Denied," Vorathkul said. "They will hold their positions. Send reinforcements." "High Commander, if we send more troops to the surface, they will die the same way. The humans have turned their entire planet into a trap. Every forest, every desert, every city is a weapon. We cannot fight an enemy we cannot see. Then we will burn their forests. We will glass their deserts. We will destroy every city until there is nothing left to hide behind." Vorathkul turned to his weapons officer. "Begin orbital bombardment, maximum firepower. I want everything on that planet turned to ash." The weapons officer hesitated. "High Commander, our orders from the Council were to capture the planet intact. If we destroy it—" "The Council is not here," Vorathkul snarled. "I am here, and I am telling you to burn everything." The order went out. Across the fleet, plasma cannons began to charge. Targeting computers locked onto cities, forests, mountains, oceans. The Varath were going to reduce Earth to a cinder, but the humans were not finished yet. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a command center that had been built to survive nuclear war, Admiral Chen Wei watched the enemy fleet prepare to fire. She was the leader of Earth's secret space force, 62 ships that had been built in hidden shipyards over 4 decades. She was also President Chen's younger sister. They are charging their main weapons, her tactical officer reported. They will fire in approximately 2 minutes. Then we have 2 minutes to stop them, Chen Wei replied. Order all ships to launch, maximum speed, attack pattern Omega. Admiral, we are outnumbered 150 to 1. If we attack now, we will be destroyed. If we do not attack now, Earth will be destroyed. Chen Wei stood up from her chair. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried herself like a giant. I did not build this fleet to hide in caves while my planet burns. Launch the ships. Yes, Admiral. All across Earth, hidden doors began to open. In the mountains of Colorado, in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, in the frozen wastes of Antarctica, ships began to rise. They were black as night, shaped like arrowheads, their hulls covered in materials that the Varath had never seen before. They flew on gravity drives, technology that humans had reverse-engineered from the crashed vessel in New Mexico. They moved without rockets, without exhaust, without sound. They simply rose into the sky and kept rising, accelerating faster than any human vehicle had ever moved before. In 3 minutes, they were in orbit. In 4 minutes, they were among the enemy fleet. The Varath did not see them coming until it was too late. Admiral Chen Wei's flagship, the UES Defiance, fired the first shot. A beam of focused gravitons struck a Varath cruiser and crushed it like an empty can. The ship simply crumpled, its armor and shields worthless against a weapon that attacked the fabric of space itself. All ships, engage, Chen Wei ordered. Target their weapon systems first. Do not let them fire on Earth. The human fleet spread out through the Varath armada like wolves among sheep. They were smaller than the enemy ships, faster, more agile. They darted between the massive Varath warships, firing at point-blank range where shields were weakest. The Varath tried to respond. They turned their weapons on these new attackers, filling space with plasma fire and missile swarms. But the human ships were hard to hit. They jinked and twisted, using their gravity drives to make turns that should have been impossible. Shots that should have been direct hits missed by meters, then by centimeters, as human pilots pushed their ships to the absolute limit. And when the Varath did hit, the results were not what they expected. Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo commanded a small attack ship called the Scorpion. She was 26 years old, born and raised in Lagos, recruited into the secret fleet when she was barely 18. She had trained for 8 years for this moment. A Varath destroyer locked onto her ship and fired a full barrage of plasma bolts. Her shields flared and collapsed. Her hull began to melt. Warning alarms screamed in her ears. I have lost shields, she reported calmly. Hull integrity at 40%. Weapons still functional. Retreat, her squadron leader ordered. Get out of there. Negative. I have a shot at their command ship. I am taking it. She pushed her throttle forward. The Scorpion accelerated toward the destroyer, its damaged hull trailing smoke and fire. The Varath crew saw her coming and tried to turn away, but they were too slow. Okonkwo aimed for the destroyer's engine section. At the last moment, she fired everything she had, 4 graviton missiles that carried enough power to crack a moon. Then she pulled up, her ship screaming in protest, and flew through the explosion of the destroyer's reactor. She emerged on the other side, her ship barely holding together, but alive. Behind her, the destroyer broke apart into 1,000,000 pieces. Target destroyed, she reported. Scorpion still functional, barely. Ready for next target. Scenes like this played out across the battle. Human pilots fought with a desperation and courage that the Varath had never encountered. When their ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When their weapons ran dry, they rammed. When they had nothing left, they ejected and fired their sidearms at enemy bridges as they flew past. It was insane. It was suicidal, and it was working. They are not retreating, Torrance said, his voice filled with something that might have been wonder. No matter how many we kill, they do not retreat. What kind of species does this? A species of fools, Vorthkul replied, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. The battle raged for hours. The human fleet lost ship after ship, their numbers dwindling with every passing minute. But for every human ship that died, it took a dozen Varath with it. The cold equations of war were shifting in a direction that Vorthkul had never expected. By the end of the first day, the human fleet had lost 38 ships. 24 remained, damaged and exhausted, their crews running on stimulants and fury. The Varath fleet had lost 800 ships. Vorthkul stared at the numbers and felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Real, genuine fear. "We need to pull back," Torrent said. "Reorganize. Our fleet is scattered. Our ground forces are being slaughtered. We need time to develop new tactics. And give them time to rebuild their defenses? To create more of those weapons?" Vorthkul shook his head. "No, we continue the assault. We throw everything we have at them until they break. High Commander, with respect, I do not think they will break. I have been watching them, studying them. They do not fight like any species we have ever encountered. They do not fight for territory or resources or glory. They fight because they refuse to lose. They fight because they would rather die than submit. Then they will die. Yes, but how many of us will die with them?" Vorthkul did not answer. He did not have an answer. On Earth, President Chen received the reports from her sister's fleet. 38 ships lost, thousands of pilots dead. But the enemy bombardment had been stopped, at least for now. "How long can we hold them?" she asked General Stone. "Days, maybe a week if we are lucky. Our pilots are exhausted, our ships are damaged, and we have used almost half of our Shiva missiles. When those run out, we will have to fight with conventional weapons. And our ground forces? Holding but taking heavy casualties. The enemy is bringing down more troops every hour. Eventually, they will overwhelm us with numbers." Chen closed her eyes. She had known this was coming. From the moment she first saw the enemy fleet, she had known that humanity probably could not win this war. The enemy was too strong, too numerous, too advanced. But she had also known that humanity would fight anyway, because that was what humans did. They fought against impossible odds. They struggled against fate. They refused to go quietly into the night. "Keep fighting," she said. "Every hour we hold is another hour for our scientists to develop new weapons. Every ship we destroy is one less ship they can use against us. Make them pay for every inch of our world." "Yes, Madam President." Chen opened her eyes and looked at the screen showing her sister's flagship. The Defiance was damaged, its hull scorched and cracked, but it was still flying, still fighting. She allowed herself a small smile. "Give them hell, little sister," she whispered. "Make them remember us." And in the cold darkness of space, the battle continued. Ships died by the dozens on both sides. Pilots screamed their last breaths into unfeeling vacuum. Weapons fire lit up the sky like a second sun. The first day of the war for Earth was over. It was only the beginning of the slaughter. The Varath had come to conquer a primitive world. They were learning that they had made a terrible mistake. Humans were not primitive. Humans were not weak. Humans were something far more dangerous. Humans were survivors, and they would fight until the last one of them was dead. In the following hours, both sides counted their losses and prepared for the next round. The Varath brought in more ships from the rear of their fleet. The humans repaired what they could and armed what they had. Neither side knew how long the war would last. Neither side knew who would ultimately win. But both sides knew one thing for certain. This war would be remembered for as long as stars still burned in the sky. This war would change everything. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, 17 Varath ships would eventually flee home to tell the tale of what they had witnessed. But that was still days away. For now there was only fire and blood and the endless screaming of the dying. The war for Earth continued, and neither side would ever be the same again. The second day of the war began with fire falling from the sky. High Commander Vorthkul had made his decision during the night. If the humans wanted to fight, he would give them a fight they would never forget. Every ship in his fleet that could reach Earth would attack. Every weapon would fire. Every soldier would land. He would drown the planet in blood. "All ships advance," he ordered. "Concentrate fire on their population centers. I want their cities burning. I want their people screaming. I want them to understand that there is no hope. 9,000 ships moved toward Earth like a wall of death. The moon batteries fired desperately, their railgun slugs tearing holes in the formation. But there were too many ships. For every one that died, 10 more took its place. The human fleet rose to meet them. 24 ships against 9,000. It was not a battle. It was a suicide mission. Admiral Chen Wei knew this. Her crew knew this. But they flew out anyway. All ships, target their troop carriers, she ordered. Stop them from landing more soldiers. If we cannot win in space, we will win on the ground. The Defiance led the charge. Its hull was still scarred from the previous day's fighting, patches of temporary repairs covering holes where missiles had punched through. Half its weapons were offline. Its shields were operating at 30% capacity. None of that mattered to Chen Wei. Fire, she said. The Defiance's main gun spoke. Graviton beams lanced out and struck a Varath carrier, crushing it like an insect. Secondary weapons targeted the escorts, punching holes in their shields and engines. Missiles flew in swarms, each one carrying a tiny black hole that ate anything it touched. Around her, the rest of the human fleet did the same. They were outnumbered beyond any reasonable calculation, but they fought as if victory was certain. They moved through the enemy formation like sharks through fish, biting and tearing and killing. But numbers could not be denied. The first human ship to die was the Spirit of Tokyo. It was hit by concentrated fire from 6 Varath destroyers, its shields collapsing in seconds. The crew had time to fire one last salvo before their reactor went critical. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka used his final moments to aim his exploding ship at the nearest enemy carrier. His death took 300 Varath with him. The second ship to die was the Pride of Nigeria. Then the Moscow's Fury, then the Amazon Dawn. One by one, the human ships fell. Their crews died at their stations, still firing, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Admiral Chen Wei watched her fleet being destroyed around her. She had known this would happen. She had accepted it when she gave the order to attack. But knowing and seeing were different things. Admiral, her tactical officer said, we have lost 12 ships. Only 12 remain. We cannot continue this. We can and we will, Chen Wei replied. As long as we are fighting up here, we are not letting them destroy our cities. Every minute we buy is another 1,000,000 lives saved. She turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to all ships. Tell them I am proud of them. Tell them that whatever happens today, we have already won. The enemy came here expecting easy prey. We have shown them that humans are not prey. We are predators. The message went out. On every surviving ship, exhausted crews heard their admiral's words and found new strength. All ship, Chen Wei continued, form up on my position. We are going to hit their flagship. If we are going to die, we are taking their commander with us. The 12 remaining human ships gathered around the Defiance. They were damaged, smoking, barely able to fly. But they formed a perfect formation and began their charge toward the eternal conquest. Varathkul saw them coming. He had been watching the human fleet fight for hours, and despite everything, he felt a strange respect for them. They were fools, but they were brave fools. They are attacking us directly, Turinth observed. 12 ships against our entire fleet. They must know they cannot win. They know, Varathkul said. They simply do not care. Order all ships to concentrate fire on them. Destroy them before they reach us. The Varath fleet turned its attention to the charging humans. Thousands of weapons opened fire at once. The space around the human ships became a storm of plasma and missiles. The first ship to die was the European Unity, then the Cairo Star, then the Seoul Phoenix. Chen Wei watched her ships die and kept flying forward. 8 ships left. 7. 6. Admiral, we cannot make it, her helmsman said. There are too many of them. Then we will die trying, Chen Wei replied. Increase speed. All remaining weapons. Fire at will. The Defiance shook as it took hit after hit. Fires broke out on multiple decks. The lights flickered and dimmed. Warning alarms screamed from every speaker. 4 ships left. 3, 2, and then only the Defiance remained. All other ships destroyed, the tactical officer reported. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. She had accepted her death. They all had. Distance to enemy flagship? Chen Wei asked. 50 kilometers in closing. Too far, much too far. The Defiance would never survive long enough to reach the eternal conquest. The human fleet's desperate charge had failed. Or had it? Chen Wei smiled. It was a cold smile. The smile of someone who had one last trick to play. Helm, new course. Take us toward that group of carriers on our starboard side. Ma'am, do it. The Defiance turned away from the flagship and accelerated toward a cluster of Varath troop carriers. These were the ships carrying soldiers down to Earth, the reinforcements that would overwhelm human ground forces. Arm the self-destruct, Chen Wei ordered. Set it for maximum yield. Admiral, if we detonate our reactor at close range, I know what will happen. Set the self-destruct. Yes, ma'am. The Defiance dove toward the carriers like a missile. The Varath tried to destroy it, but the ship was moving too fast, jinxing too wildly. It was a death run, and nothing was going to stop it. Chen Wei stood up from her chair. She looked around at her bridge crew, at the men and women who had served with her for years. They looked back at her without fear. It has been an honor, she said. The honor was ours, Admiral, her first officer replied. The Defiance plunged into the center of the carrier formation. Chen Wei pressed the button. The reactor exploded with the force of a small star. The explosion consumed the Defiance instantly, then expanded outward in a wave of fire and radiation. 12 troop carriers were vaporized. 20 more were crippled. 50,000 Varath soldiers died in seconds. The human space fleet was gone, but it had taken nearly 1,000 enemy ships with it. On Earth, the news spread quickly. Admiral Chen Wei was dead. The space fleet was destroyed. There was nothing left between the Varath and their planet. President Chen received the news in her bunker. She listened to the report in silence, her face showing nothing. Only when the messenger had finished did she allow herself a moment of grief. Her sister was gone. Her last family was gone. But she was still president. She still had a planet to defend. How many troops have landed? She asked General Stone. 3 million, and more coming every hour. They are overwhelming our defenses in North America and Europe. Our forces are falling back to secondary positions. And our ground weapons? The ones we have not used yet? Stone hesitated. Madam President, if we use those weapons, the collateral damage will be enormous. We will kill millions of our own people. And if we do not use them? Stone was silent. He did not need to answer. They both knew what would happen if the Varath were not stopped. Use them, Chen said. God forgive us, but use them. Yes, Madam President. The weapons Chen was talking about were the last resort. They were the things that humans had built but hoped never to use. Bombs that released plagues designed to kill only Varath biology. Machines that burrowed into the ground and created earthquakes wherever the enemy gathered. Satellites that could focus sunlight into beams hot enough to melt cities. They were weapons of mass destruction in the truest sense, and now they would be unleashed. In the Nevada desert, Commander Zareth led a column of Varath tanks toward the ruins of Los Angeles. His force was massive, 50,000 soldiers and 200 vehicles. The humans had retreated before him, abandoning city after city. Victory seemed certain. Then the sky turned white. Zareth looked up and saw something impossible. The sun seemed to be growing brighter, focusing, intensifying. A beam of pure heat descended from the heavens and struck the center of his formation. The temperature rose to levels that even Varath armor could not withstand. Tanks melted into puddles of metal. Soldiers cooked inside their suits. The sand beneath them turned to glass. Zareth was at the edge of the beam. He survived, barely, crawling out of his burning vehicle with half his body scorched black. He lay on the glassy ground and watched his army die. What? What are they? He whispered. He would never learn the answer. A human sniper, hiding in the ruins a kilometer away, put a bullet through his head. Similar scenes played out across the planet. In Russia, the Varath occupying Moscow suddenly began to cough and choke. A plague was spreading through their ranks, a disease that targeted their specific genetic structure. Within hours, 50,000 soldiers were dead, and the rest were fleeing. In Japan, the ground beneath the Varath staging area suddenly shook. Earthquake machines buried deep underground had been activated, creating localized tremors that collapsed buildings and opened cracks in the earth. Soldiers fell into chasms that closed behind them, burying them alive. In Africa, swarms of nanobots descended on Varath positions. These tiny machines, invisible to the naked eye, ate through armor and flesh alike. An army of 100,000 was reduced to bones in less than an hour. The Varath had thought they understood human weapons. They had prepared for nuclear bombs and guided missiles. They had not prepared for this. "What are they doing?" Varathkul demanded. "What are these weapons?" His science officers worked frantically, analyzing the attacks. The answers they found were terrifying. "The humans have been preparing for war for decades, High Commander. They have created weapons specifically designed to kill us. The plague targets our genetic structure. The nanobots are programmed to recognize our biology. Even the earthquake machines were placed in locations where we would likely gather." How did they know where we would land? They did not. They placed weapons everywhere. Their entire planet is a trap, High Commander. Every continent, every city, every piece of land has been prepared for invasion. Varathkul felt the cold touch of fear again. It was stronger now, closer to panic. His fleet had lost over 1,000 ships. His ground forces had lost nearly 1 million soldiers, and they were no closer to conquering this world than they had been when they arrived. "We should retreat," Torrance said. "Regroup, develop countermeasures for their weapons, return with a larger fleet." "No," Varathkul interrupted. "We have come too far to retreat now. The Dominion Council will not tolerate failure. We must conquer this world regardless of the cost. The cost may be our entire fleet." "Then so be it." Varathkul turned to his communications officer. "Order all ships to begin orbital bombardment. Target their weapon installations, their cities, their population centers. If they want to fight dirty, we will fight dirtier. Burn their world until there is nothing left." "High Commander, our orders from the Council—" "The Council is not here," Varathkul screamed. His composure finally broke, rage and fear mixing in his voice. "I am here. I am in command. And I order you to burn this planet to ashes." The order went out. Across the Varath fleet, weapons charged once more. But the humans were not finished. In the mountains of Colorado, deep underground, a different kind of weapon was being prepared. This was not a bomb or a plague or an earthquake machine. This was something far more dangerous. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was the lead scientist on Project Prometheus. She had spent 30 years working on this device, a machine that could tap into the energy of space itself. It was based on theories that most physicists considered impossible. It was powered by materials that should not exist in this universe, and it was finally ready. "Is everyone evacuated?" she asked her assistant. "Yes, doctor. The facility is clear except for us." "Then activate the weapon." The assistant hesitated. "Doctor, we have never tested this at full power. We do not know what will happen." "I know exactly what will happen," Rodriguez replied. "We are going to tear a hole in the fabric of space. We are going to create a wound that will swallow every ship in orbit." "And us?" Rodriguez smiled sadly. "Yes, and us. But the weapon must be controlled manually. There is no other way." "Doctor, go, get out of here. I will activate it myself." "No." The assistant stood straight. "I will stay with you. Someone needs to monitor the power levels. And besides, I have no one waiting for me outside. This is as good a place as any to die." Rodriguez looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Doctor, for everything." They turned to their consoles and began the activation sequence. Above them, the Varath fleet began to fire on Earth. Plasma rained down on cities and forests. Mountains melted under concentrated bombardment. Millions died in seconds. And deep underground, 2 scientists watched their screens and waited for the right moment. "The enemy fleet is clustering," Maria reported. "They are concentrating their fire on the eastern seaboard of North America." "Perfect," Rodriguez said. "They are directly above us. Activate the weapon." Maria pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screens went crazy. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the instruments could measure. The underground facility began to shake. "It is working," Rodriguez whispered. "It is actually working." In orbit, the Varath ships suddenly found themselves being pulled toward a single point. Their engines fired desperately, trying to escape, but the pull was too strong. Ship after ship was dragged toward the center of the formation, where something impossible was happening. A hole was opening in space itself. Not a portal or a wormhole, but a true wound in reality. Light disappeared into it. Matter disappeared into it. Even time seemed to bend around it. "What is that?" Vorothkul screamed. "What is happening?" "Unknown, High Commander. Our instruments cannot analyze it. It is eating our ships." Over 300 Vareth ships were swallowed by the wound before it finally collapsed. The energy required to maintain it had been too much. Deep underground, the Prometheus facility had been completely destroyed, along with Dr. Rodriguez and Maria, but their sacrifice had saved millions of lives. Vorothkul stared at the empty space where 300 of his ships had been. His hands were shaking. His mind was racing. What kind of species was this? What kind of people created weapons that tore holes in reality itself? "High Commander," Torrance said, "we have lost over 2,000 ships since the invasion began. Our ground forces have taken over 1 million casualties. We still control less than 10% of the planet's surface." "I know," Vorothkul said. His voice was quiet now. All the rage burned out of him. "What are your orders?" Vorothkul looked at the planet below. It was burning in a dozen places, scarred by orbital bombardment in ground combat. But it was still fighting. It was still resisting. "Continue the attack," he said. "We have come too far to stop now. Either we conquer this world or we die trying." And so the war continued. Day 3 began with both sides exhausted, bloodied, but unwilling to surrender. The humans had lost their space fleet. They had lost millions of soldiers and civilians. They had used weapons that would scar their planet for generations. But they had not lost hope. In bunkers and caves, in ruined cities and scorched forests, humans continued to fight. They ambushed Vareth patrols. They sabotaged enemy equipment. They died by the thousands, but they took enemies with them by the tens of thousands. The Vareth had expected conquest. They had found something else. They had found the species that would rather burn than bend. And the burning was only beginning. By the 4th day of the war, High Commander Vorothkul had stopped sleeping. He stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, watching the tactical displays with eyes that had grown dull from exhaustion. The numbers on those displays told a story he could not believe, a story that made no sense. He had arrived at Earth with 9,900 ships. He now had fewer than 7,000. Over 3,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of Vareth engineering, had been destroyed by a species that should not have been able to scratch their paint. Another patrol was ambushed in the southern region of the Asian continent, Torrance reported. His voice had lost all emotion. He was just stating facts now, too tired to feel anything. 500 soldiers dead. The humans used some kind of chemical weapon that dissolved their armor. "What kind of chemical?" Vorothkul asked. "Our scientists are still analyzing it. It appears to be based on fluorine compounds. Highly corrosive, specifically engineered to react with the metals in our armor." "How do they keep developing new weapons so quickly?" Torrance did not answer. He did not have an answer. The truth was something that the Vareth had never encountered before. Humans did not fight like other species. Other species had militaries with clear chains of command. They developed weapons through official channels. They followed established doctrines and tactics. Humans did none of that. In every city, in every village, in every hidden camp, humans were inventing. Scientists who had never met were working on the same problems and finding different solutions. Soldiers were modifying their weapons on the battlefield, creating new tools from scraps and salvage. Children were building bombs in their garages. It was chaos, it was madness, and it was incredibly effective. A human engineer in Buenos Aires had discovered a weakness in Vareth shield generators. Within hours, the information had spread across the entire planet through underground communication networks. By the end of the day, every human soldier knew how to exploit that weakness. A chemist in Mumbai had created a compound that could eat through Vareth armor. Within days, factories across India were producing it in massive quantities, shipping it to front lines all over the world. A teenager in Seoul had figured out how to hack into Vareth communication frequencies. Now human commanders could listen to every order the enemy gave. The Vareth had conquered 2,000 worlds. On all of those worlds, they had faced organized militaries that could be destroyed by destroying their leadership. Cut off the head and the body died. Humans had no head. They were a hydra. Cut off one leader and 10 more would rise to replace them. Destroy one city and 100 villages would continue the fight. They are learning faster than we can adapt, Torrance said. Our tactics are becoming useless within hours of deployment. Our weapons are being countered almost as soon as we use them. I have never seen anything like this. Then we must do something they cannot counter, Vorthkul replied. Something final. What do you suggest? Vorthkul turned to his science officer. How long would it take to crack this planet's crust, to cause enough geological damage to make the surface uninhabitable? The science officer went pale. High Commander, that would kill everything on the planet. It would take decades for the surface to become stable again. We would gain nothing but a dead rock. At this point, I would prefer a dead rock to this nightmare. It would take approximately 2 days of concentrated orbital bombardment. We would need to focus our fire on the tectonic fault lines. Then do it, Torrance stepped forward. High Commander, I must object. The Dominion Council sent us to capture this planet, not destroy it. If we return with nothing but rubble, they will have us executed. If we do not return at all, we will not have to worry about execution. Vorthkul turned to face his second-in-command. We are losing, Torrance. I know it. You know it. Every officer in this fleet knows it. We cannot conquer this world through conventional means. Either we destroy it, or we retreat and admit defeat. Then perhaps we should retreat and tell the Council that a primitive species drove us away, that 9,000 ships were not enough to conquer one small planet? Vorthkul shook his head. No, I would rather die here than face that shame. High Commander, my decision is made. Begin the bombardment. Torrance looked at his commander for a long moment. He saw something in Vorthkul's eyes that he had never seen before. Not just exhaustion or frustration, something deeper, something broken. Vorthkul had spent 300 years as a conqueror. He had built his entire identity around victory. The idea that he could lose, that he could fail, was destroying him from the inside. Torrance nodded slowly. As you command, High Commander. He turned to carry out the order, knowing that it would likely mean the death of everyone on the planet below. Billions of humans, most of them innocent civilians, would die for the crime of being too stubborn to surrender. But Torrance was a soldier. He followed orders, or at least he always had. On Earth, human intelligence agencies picked up the Varath communications almost immediately. The teenage hacker in Seoul had done his job well. President Chen was informed within minutes. She listened to the translation of Vorthkul's orders and felt her blood run cold. They are going to destroy the planet, she said. They cannot conquer us, so they are going to kill us all. Madam President, we need to do something, General Stone said. We cannot stop an orbital bombardment of that magnitude. Our ground weapons cannot reach high enough, and our space fleet is gone. I know. Then what do we do? Chen was silent for a long moment. She thought about her sister, dead in the vacuum of space. She thought about the millions of soldiers and civilians who had given their lives. She thought about everything humanity had sacrificed to survive, and she made a decision. General, how many of our assault teams are still operational? We have about a dozen teams capable of offensive operations. Most of them are scattered across the globe, fighting guerrilla actions against the occupation forces. Call them back, all of them. I have a new mission for them. What kind of mission? Chen looked at the screen showing the enemy fleet in orbit. Thousands of ships, any one of which could destroy a city, an impossible target for any conventional attack. But humans had never limited themselves to conventional attacks. We are going to board their flagship, she said. We are going to kill their commander, and we are going to make them understand that no matter how far they run, no matter how high they hide, we will find them and we will destroy them. Stone stared at her. That is suicide. We do not have any ships to get our people up there. We have the enemy's ships. Every assault team that has been fighting on the ground has captured Varath vehicles and equipment. Some of them have captured shuttles. Stolen shuttles with stolen codes. The enemy will see them coming. Not if we launch a massive attack at the same time. Something so big that they will be too distracted to notice a few shuttles. Stone considered this. It was insane. It was desperate. It was exactly the kind of plan that had no right to work. It was perfectly human. "What kind of attack?" he asked. "Everything we have left. Every missile, every weapon, every aircraft that can still fly. We throw it all at them at once. And while they are dealing with that, our teams slip through and hit their flagship. And if the teams fail, then we all die anyway. At least this way, we die fighting." Stone nodded slowly. "I will start making calls. Do it fast. We do not have much time." While the president prepared her desperate gamble, something else was happening on the ground. In the ruins of Chicago, a group of 50 soldiers prepared for a mission that they knew would probably kill them. They were the Hellhounds, one of the best special operations units in the American military. They had been fighting the Varath since the first day, ambushing patrols and destroying supply lines. Now they had a new objective: board the enemy flagship, kill the enemy commander, save the world. Their leader was Sergeant Maria Santos. She was 32 years old with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had lost her entire family in the initial bombardment: her parents, her siblings, her husband, her children. All gone in a flash of plasma. She had nothing left to live for, but she had plenty to die for. "Listen up," she told her team. "We have one chance at this. One shuttle, one approach, one shot at their commander. If we fail, humanity dies. If we succeed, we might buy our people enough time to win this war." "Sergeant, how are we supposed to get past their security?" a young soldier asked. "That ship has 10,000 crew members. Even if we get aboard, we will be outnumbered 200 to 1. We do not need to fight 10,000 crew members. We only need to reach the bridge. Our intelligence says the Varath flagship has a command structure centered on a single point. Kill the commander, and the whole fleet loses coordination. And then we blow the ship's reactor and take as many of them with us as we can." The soldier nodded. He was barely 20 years old, just a kid who had been in boot camp when the invasion started. But his eyes were hard, his hands were steady. The war had aged him beyond his years. "Let us do this," he said. Santos looked at her team. 50 soldiers, all volunteers, all knowing they were probably going to die. They came from every branch of the military, every walk of life. There were men and women, old and young, veterans and rookies. The only thing they had in common was a willingness to sacrifice everything for their planet. "The shuttle launches in 1 hour," Santos said. "Get your gear ready, say your prayers, write your letters, and when we go up there, remember who we are fighting for. Remember everyone we have lost, and make the bastards pay." The hour passed quickly, too quickly. Before Santos knew it, she was strapped into a stolen Varath shuttle, watching Earth fall away beneath her. The shuttle climbed through the atmosphere, its stolen codes transmitting to any ship that challenged it. So far, the codes were working. The Varath were too busy dealing with the massive attack that President Shen had launched to pay attention to one small shuttle. Santos watched the battle through the shuttle's windows. Missiles rose from Earth like fireflies, thousands of them streaking toward the enemy fleet. Aircraft flew in suicidal waves, their pilots knowing they had no chance of survival but attacking anyway. It was beautiful and terrible all at once. "Approaching the flagship," the pilot announced. "They are hailing us. Use the codes." "I am. They seem to be accepting them. We are being directed to a landing bay on the port side." "Take us in." The shuttle slipped into the Eternal Conquest's landing bay without incident. Santos waited until the bay doors closed behind them before she gave the order. "Go. Fast and quiet. Kill anyone who sees us." The Hellhounds burst out of the shuttle like demons. They moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, their stolen Varath weapons cutting down every enemy they encountered. Silenced shots, quick knives, broken necks. Bodies fell and did not rise again. The Varath crew was not prepared for an attack from within. They were focused on the battle outside, on the human missiles and aircraft that were dying against their shields. They never expected human soldiers to be walking their own corridors. By the time they realized what was happening, Santos and her team were already halfway to the bridge. "Contact ahead," a scout reported. "Security checkpoint. 20 guards." "Grenades," Santos ordered. "On my mark." They threw the grenades in perfect synchronization. The explosions tore through the checkpoint, killing most of the guards instantly. The survivors were gunned down before they could raise an alarm. The hellhounds moved on. Behind them, they left a trail of bodies and blood. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Varathkul was not paying attention to the internal alarms that had started to flash. He was too focused on the battle outside. "Their attack is failing," he said. "Our shields are holding. Their missiles cannot penetrate our defenses." "Yes, High Commander," Torrent replied, "but we are losing ships to the attack. They are targeting our vulnerable points with surprising accuracy." "It does not matter. As long as the flagship survives, we maintain control of the fleet. Continue the bombardment preparations." "High Commander, I am receiving reports of weapons fire inside the ship. Our security teams are not responding." Varathkul finally turned away from the tactical display. "What?" "It appears that humans have boarded us. They are moving toward the bridge." For a moment, Varathkul could not process what he was hearing. Humans on his ship. That was impossible. No shuttle could have gotten through their defenses. Then he remembered the chaos of the battle, the thousands of signals filling their sensors, the overwhelming attack that had drawn every eye outward. It had been a distraction. The whole massive assault had been nothing but a distraction, meant to let a handful of soldiers sneak aboard. "How many?" he demanded. "Unknown. Initial estimates suggest fewer than 100. 100? Against 10,000? Varathkul laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They are insane. Send every security team we have. Kill them all." But the hellhounds were not waiting to be killed. They were moving fast, faster than the Vareth could respond. Every second brought them closer to the bridge. Santos led the charge. She had lost 10 soldiers getting this far, 10 more wounded, but they were almost there. She could see the bridge doors ahead, massive barriers of reinforced metal. "Explosives," she ordered. "Maximum yield." Her demolition expert planted the charges while the rest of the team held off the Varath security forces that were finally catching up. The corridor behind them became a killing field, bodies stacking up as the humans fought desperately to hold their position. "Charges set. Everyone back." The explosion tore the bridge doors off their hinges. Santos was through before the smoke cleared, her weapon firing at anything that moved. The bridge was chaos. Officers scrambling for weapons, guards trying to form a defensive line, and at the center of it all, standing before the main view screen, was the alien that had ordered the destruction of her world. Varathkul. Santos did not hesitate. She raised her weapon and fired. The shot hit Varathkul in the chest, staggering him back. But Vareth were tough. Their bodies could take damage that would kill a human instantly. He stayed on his feet, reaching for his own weapon. Santos fired again, and again, and again. Each shot pushed Varathkul further back. Green blood sprayed from his wounds. His 4 eyes were wide with disbelief. This could not be happening. He was a conqueror of worlds. He could not die here, at the hands of primitives. But he was dying. He could feel it. "You," he gasped. "You are just animals." Santos walked up to him. She was wounded herself now, cuts and burns covering her body. But her eyes were clear. Her hands were steady. "We are humans," she said, "and we do not surrender." She pressed her weapon against his head and pulled the trigger. High Commander Varathkul, conqueror of 2,000 worlds, died on the bridge of his own flagship, killed by a species he had thought was beneath his notice. Santos did not have time to celebrate. More Varath were coming. She looked at her surviving soldiers. 6 left. Just 6. "Set the charges on the reactor," she ordered. "All of them." "Sergeant, if we blow the reactor at close range—" "I know," she smiled. It was a sad smile, a final smile. "We knew this was a one-way trip. Let us make it count." The charges were set. The countdown began. Santos found a security camera and looked into it, knowing that somewhere on Earth, people were watching. "Tell the president we got him," she said. "Tell her the hellhounds send their regards." She raised her hand in a final salute. The reactor exploded. The Eternal Conquest was torn apart from the inside. The explosion consumed the bridge, the corridors, the landing bays. It spread outward in a wave of fire that swallowed everything it touched. Secondary explosions followed as weapons magazines and fuel stores ignited. The flagship broke into pieces, each piece trailing fire and debris. And when the explosions finally stopped, there was nothing left but wreckage. In orbit around Earth, the Varath fleet suddenly found itself without a commander. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination began to drift. Captains who had been following orders suddenly had no orders to follow. The chain of command had been broken. On Earth, President Chen watched the flagship die. She watched her people's sacrifice pay off, and she allowed herself a moment of hope. The war was not over, but for the first time she believed humanity might actually survive. "God bless you, Sergeant Santos," she whispered. "God bless you all." And somewhere in the wreckage of the eternal conquest, Maria Santos smiled one last time before the fire took her. She had won. Humanity would live. The death of High Commander Vorath Kul changed everything. For 6 days, the Varath fleet had operated as a single weapon, guided by one mind and one will. Every ship had known its place. Every captain had followed orders without question. The chain of command had been absolute and unbreakable. Now that chain was shattered. Second Commander Torinth stood in the emergency command center of his cruiser, the Blade of Justice. He had not been on the Eternal Conquest when it exploded. He had been overseeing ground operations from orbit, coordinating the bombardment that was supposed to crack Earth's crust. Now he was the highest-ranking officer left alive. "How many did we lose?" he asked. His voice was hollow, empty of all emotion. "The flagship and 93 escort vessels were caught in the explosion," a tactical officer reported. "High Commander Vorath Kul is confirmed dead, so is most of the command staff." "What is our current fleet strength?" "Approximately 6,800 ships, Commander, down from 9,900 at the start of the invasion." Torinth closed his eyes. Over 3,000 ships lost, millions of soldiers dead. And for what? They had not even conquered half the planet. Humans still held most of their major cities, still controlled most of their resources. Every time the Varath thought they had won a victory, the humans found a way to strike back. And now this. A handful of soldiers, maybe 50 at most, had boarded the most heavily defended ship in the fleet and killed the High Commander. They had died doing it, but they had won. Torinth had lived for 200 years. He had fought in dozens of wars, conquered dozens of worlds. He had never seen anything like this. "Commander, what are your orders?" the tactical officer asked. Torinth was silent for a long moment. He thought about Vorath Kul's last command, the order to crack the planet's crust. He thought about the Dominion Council waiting back home, expecting news of victory. He thought about the soldiers on the ground, still fighting, still dying. And he thought about the humans. He had studied them during the invasion. He had watched their tactics, analyzed their weapons, read their communications. He had seen things that made no sense to him. Soldiers charging into certain death with smiles on their faces. Civilians throwing rocks at armored tanks. Children rigging explosives and blowing themselves up to take out enemy patrols. An entire species that seemed to view death as just another weapon to be used against their enemies. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to make the Varath pay. Every ship the Varath lost, every soldier who died, was a victory for the humans. They would keep fighting until the last one of them was dead. And even then, Torinth suspected they would find a way to fight some more. "Commander?" the tactical officer prompted. Torinth opened his eyes. "Signal all ships. We are withdrawing." The bridge went silent. Every officer turned to stare at him with expressions of shock. "Commander, did you say withdrawing?" "Yes. We cannot win this war. Every day we stay here, we lose more ships and more soldiers. The humans have weapons we do not understand, tactics we cannot counter, and a determination that borders on insanity. If we continue this fight, we will all die." "But the Council is not here. They are not watching their soldiers die by the thousands. They are not seeing their ships torn apart by weapons that should not exist. I am here. I am in command. And I say we leave." He turned to the communications officer. "Transmit my orders to the entire fleet. All ships are to break off combat operations and prepare for hyperspace jump. Ground forces are to return to their transports immediately. We leave in 2 hours." "Yes, Commander." The orders went out. Across the fleet, captains and crews received the news with mixed reactions. Some were relieved, grateful to finally escape this nightmare. Others were angry, seeing retreat as a betrayal of everything they had fought for. But all of them obeyed. Torinth was in command now, and his word was law. On the ground, the Varath began to withdraw. Soldiers who had been fighting for days suddenly received orders to fall back to their landing zones. Tanks and vehicles that had been pushing into human territory turned around and headed for the transports. The humans watched them go with suspicion. Was this a trick? A trap? Some kind of new strategy? President Chen received reports of the withdrawal in her bunker. She did not believe them at first. "They are leaving?" she asked. "Just like that?" "It appears so, Madam President," General Stone replied. "Our satellites are tracking their ships. They are moving toward a point beyond the moon, forming up for what looks like a hyperspace jump. Why would they retreat now? They still have thousands of ships. They could continue the bombardment, crack the planet like they planned." "I believe Sergeant Santos's attack changed things. She did not just kill their commander. She broke their will." Chen thought about this. The Varath had never lost before. They had never faced a species that could hurt them so badly. The death of their high commander, killed by a handful of soldiers on a suicide mission, must have shaken them to their core. If humans could do that, what else could they do? The Varath were not retreating because they were beaten. They were retreating because they were afraid. "Track their movements," Chen ordered. "Make sure they actually leave. And if they try to turn around, hit them with everything we have left." "Yes, Madam President." In orbit, Torinth watched the fleet assemble. Ships were streaming in from all over the planet, forming up in the massive formation needed for a coordinated hyperspace jump. The withdrawal was proceeding smoothly, though some ground forces were reporting difficulties getting to their transports. "Commander, several units are reporting heavy resistance from human forces," a ground operations officer reported. "The humans are not letting them retreat peacefully. Order them to fight through. We do not leave anyone behind." "Commander, that will cost us more casualties." "I know. Do it anyway." The humans were not going to make this easy. Even in victory, they were determined to extract every drop of blood they could. Torinth found himself respecting them, even as he hated them. These were not primitives. These were warriors. As the hours passed, the fleet continued to shrink. Ships that were too damaged to make the hyperspace jump were abandoned. Soldiers who could not reach their transports were left behind. It was brutal, but necessary. By the time the fleet was ready to jump, Torinth took a final count of their forces. "Fleet strength is now approximately 4,200 ships," the tactical officer reported. "We have recovered approximately 1.5 million ground troops." 4,000 ships. They had arrived with nearly 10,000. Over half the fleet had been destroyed or disabled. "What about casualties?" Torinth asked. "Difficult to determine precisely, Commander. Preliminary estimates suggest approximately 3 million dead, including High Commander Vorathkul and his command staff. 3 million soldiers, dead, on a planet that should have fallen in a day." Torinth nodded slowly. "Begin the hyperspace jump." "Yes, Commander." The fleet's hyperspace drives began to spin up. Energy fields formed around each ship, preparing to tear holes in the fabric of space. And then the humans attacked. They came from everywhere. Missiles that had been hidden in debris fields, drones that had been playing dead, weapons platforms on the moon that had been saving their last ammunition for this moment. The Varath shields were already lowered for the jump. They were defenseless. Ships began to die. Railgun slugs tore through hulls. Missiles detonated against engines. Plasma fire raked across formations, turning warships into burning wreckage. "All ships, emergency jump!" Torinth screamed. "Now! Jump now!" The fleet tried to obey. Hyperspace portals began to open, purple wounds in the fabric of reality. Ships dove toward them, desperate to escape the slaughter. But the humans were not finished. Gravitational mines, hidden near the jump point, activated. They created distortions in space that destabilized the hyperspace portals. Ships that tried to jump were torn apart by the conflicting forces, their crews dying in agony as their vessels were stretched and crushed at the same time. Torinth watched his fleet die around him, ships he had served with for centuries, Crews he had known for decades. All of them gone in seconds. Recalculate jump coordinates, he ordered. Find a clear path. Working on it, Commander. The gravitational distortions are making it difficult. More ships died. The humans were using everything they had, every weapon they had been saving, every trick they had been holding in reserve. This was their final assault, their last chance to destroy the fleeing enemy. And it was working. The blade of justice shook as a railgun slug passed close enough to scrape its shields. Torrent gripped his command chair and refused to show fear. Status? Jump coordinates recalculated. We have a clear path, but it is narrow. We will lose more ships trying to reach it. Do it, all ships. Follow my lead. The blade of justice accelerated toward the new jump point. Other ships followed, those that were still able to move. Behind them, the humans continued to fire, continued to kill. The jump point grew closer. Torrent watched the tactical display, counting the ships that were still with him. The number kept dropping. 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. The blade of justice reached the jump point and dove through. The purple light of hyperspace surrounded them, and the chaos of battle fell away. Torrent allowed himself to breathe. How many made it through, he asked. The tactical officer checked his instruments. His face went pale. 17, Commander. 17 ships made it through the jump point. 17 out of 9,900. Torrent sat in his command chair and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The invasion of Earth was over. The Varath had lost. The journey back to Dominion space took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence, of mourning, of trying to understand what had happened. Torrent spent most of that time in his quarters, writing his report to the Dominion Council. It was the hardest thing he had ever written. He wrote about the human weapons, the technologies that should not have existed. He wrote about their tactics, the way they adapted and evolved faster than any species he had ever encountered. He wrote about their determination, their willingness to die rather than surrender. And he wrote his recommendation. When the 17 ships finally arrived at the Dominion capital world, they were greeted by a fleet of escorts and taken directly to the council chambers. Torrent was brought before the assembled leaders of the Dominion, the most powerful beings in 3 galaxies. They looked at him with contempt and anger. He had failed. He had retreated. He had brought shame upon the Dominion. Explain yourself, the High Counselor demanded. How did you lose an entire invasion fleet to a primitive species? Torrent stood straight. He had thought about this moment for 3 weeks. He knew what would probably happen to him, but he also knew what he had to say. They are not primitive, he said. They appear primitive because they have not yet left their world. But their technology is advanced, their tactics are sophisticated, and their will to fight is unlike anything we have ever encountered. You had 10,000 ships, and they destroyed most of them. We killed millions of their people, and they kept fighting. We destroyed their cities, and they kept fighting. We bombed their planet from orbit, and they kept fighting. They do not surrender. They do not give up. They fight until they win or until they are all dead. Then we will send a larger fleet, 20,000 ships, 30,000, however many it takes. Torrent shook his head. It will not matter. You can send every ship in the Dominion, and it will not be enough. By the time you arrive, they will have developed new weapons. They will have learned from our invasion. They will be stronger than before. He looked at the council members, meeting their eyes one by one. I have fought for 200 years. I have conquered worlds that made the Varath seem like children. But I have never faced an enemy like the humans. They are not like us. They are not like any species we have ever encountered. They are something new, something dangerous. What do you recommend? Torrent took a deep breath. Avoid them. At all costs, do not attack them. Do not threaten them. Do not even let them know we exist if possible. Leave their world alone and hope they never come looking for us. The council chamber erupted in outrage. Members shouted and cursed, calling Torrent a coward, a traitor, a failure. But he stood his ground. I am telling you the truth, he said. You can execute me for it if you wish, but that will not change what happened. We invaded Earth with 9,900 ships. 17 escaped. 17. That is the reality we face. The High Counselor silenced the chamber with a gesture. You truly believe they are that dangerous? I believe they are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of who they are. They are survivors. They adapt, they learn, they overcome, and they never, ever give up. He paused, remembering the faces of the soldiers who had died on the Eternal Conquest Bridge, remembering the human sergeant who had smiled as she killed the High Commander. If we go back there, we will die, all of us. That is not speculation. That is certainty. The council debated for hours. In the end, they made their decision. The humans were classified as a forbidden species. Their world was marked with the highest threat rating in the Dominion's database. All ships were ordered to avoid the Sol system by a margin of at least 10 light years. And Torrent was sentenced to exile for his failure. He did not mind. He had saved what remained of his fleet. He had warned the council. He had done what he could. As he boarded the transport that would take him to his exile world, he took one last look at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a small yellow sun's light, the humans were rebuilding, learning, growing. He had told the council that the humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, but he had not told them everything. He had not told them about the look in the human sergeant's eyes as she killed Vorthkul. It was not hatred or fear or anger. It was something else, something that Torrent had only seen once before in the eyes of the greatest warriors of his own species. It was joy. The humans did not just fight to survive. They did not just fight to win. They fought because they loved it, because war was in their blood, in their bones, in their very souls. And now they knew that other species existed. They knew that the galaxy was filled with worlds to explore, enemies to fight, challenges to overcome. Torrent looked at the stars and felt a chill run through his body. The Dominion thought that by marking Earth as forbidden, they could contain the humans. They thought that distance and isolation would keep them safe. They were wrong. The humans would not stay on their world forever. They would build new ships, better ships. They would venture out into the darkness. They would find the Dominion. And when they did, the 17 ships that escaped would seem like a miracle. 40 years later, Torrent's prediction came true. Human ships appeared at the borders of Dominion space. They were not warships, at least not obviously. They came with their weapons powered down, their communications channels open, broadcasting messages of peace and trade. But everyone who saw them remembered the stories. Everyone knew what had happened at Earth. The humans were greeted with fear and respect. They were given everything they asked for: trade agreements, diplomatic relations, access to Dominion markets and technologies. No one dared refuse them, and when human ambassadors walked through the halls of the Dominion Council, the members who had been there 40 years ago looked at them with something close to terror. These were the people who had killed a fleet of 10,000 ships. These were the people who had fought with rocks and knives against plasma cannons and power armor. These were the people who had smiled as they died, knowing that their deaths would bring victory. Humanity had earned something that day, not through diplomacy or trade or gentle words. They had earned it through blood and fire and sacrifice. They had earned fear. And in a galaxy full of predators and conquerors, fear was the only thing that truly mattered. One of the human ambassadors, a young woman named Elena Santos, paused before the great memorial that the Dominion had built to their fallen fleet. It was a massive structure, listing the names of every ship and every soldier that had died at Earth. She looked at the names for a long time. Then she turned to the Dominion official who was escorting her. "My grandmother died in that war," she said. "She led the team that killed your commander." The official went pale. I am sorry for your loss." "Do not be sorry. She died exactly the way she wanted to die. Fighting, winning." Elena smiled. It was the same smile her grandmother had worn on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, in the moment before everything ended. "We remember her as a hero, as one of the people who saved our species. I suppose you remember her as something else." "We remember her as a warning," the official admitted. "Good." Elena's smile grew wider. That is exactly what she would have wanted. She turned and walked away, leaving the official standing alone before the memorial. He watched her go and felt the old fear rise in his chest. The humans were here now. They were part of the galactic community. They smiled and traded and signed treaties like everyone else. But everyone knew the truth. The humans were not like everyone else. They never had been. And the galaxy would never forget the day that 9,900 ships attacked Earth, and only 17 escaped to tell the tale. The story spread to every corner of known space. It became a legend, then a myth, then a warning passed down through generations. Do not anger the humans. Do not threaten their world. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness, because when humans fight, they do not stop. They never stop. And in the end, they always win. This is the legacy of Earth. This is the legacy of humanity. This is why the galaxy learned to fear a small blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star. And this is why, to this day, no one has ever tried to invade Earth again.